was the monarch who steered Britain through war, revolution, and the twilight of an empire. King George V. The sailor prince turned sovereign ruled not with flamboyance, but with quiet endurance. During his reign, Europe's old dynasties crumbled, thrones fell, and yet his crown endured. Beneath the formality of court life, however, lay a man of strict duty, deep family loyalty, and unyielding expectations. But behind the stoic image of the king stood another story, that of a father and 6 children born into privilege and pressure, bound by blood, yet divided by destiny. Each child carried not just royal titles, but the weight of an empire in decline. Some would rise to power, others would rebel against the very structure that defined them. And together, their lives would mirror the transformation of the British monarchy itself, from imperial grandeur to modern vulnerability. Tonight, we uncover the story of King George V and his 6 children, a dynasty shaped by war tradition and the private cost of public duty. Number 6. Prince John, the Lost Prince. Prince John, the youngest child of King George V and Queen Mary, was born on July 12, 1905, a boy who would come to symbolize both the tenderness and the tragedy of the royal family. While his 5 elder siblings were groomed for titles, duty, and diplomacy, John's life would unfold far from the glittering halls of Buckingham Palace. From an early age, it became clear that John was different. Cheerful and affectionate, he had his mother's charm and his father's mischievous smile. But by the age of 4, he began suffering from epileptic seizures. In an era when disability was poorly understood and often hidden, the royal household faced an impossible dilemma: protect their son's dignity or preserve the monarchy's carefully controlled image of perfection. By 1916, as the world tore itself apart in the Great War, Prince John's health worsened. His seizures became more frequent and severe, and his learning difficulties deepened. Queen Mary, though devoted to him, reluctantly accepted her husband's decision to move John to Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, where he would live in the care of a nurse and household staff. The king visited when duties allowed, but the truth was undeniable. The lost prince, as history would later call him, had been quietly removed from the public eye. Yet the isolation was not one of cruelty, but of sorrow. Letters from Queen Mary revealed deep maternal affection. She sent him toys, photographs, and wrote lovingly about his progress. The family visited often, and John's siblings, especially his sister Mary and brother George, adored him. Despite his condition, John was said to have a radiant personality, greeting everyone with laughter and delight. But tragedy came swiftly. On the night of January 18, 1919, as Britain emerged from the shadow of war, Prince John suffered a massive seizure and died in his sleep. He was just 13 years old. His mother wrote in her diary the next morning, "Our poor darling little Johnny was called to heaven. He had been such a brave little boy." The news was met with subdued sorrow. The British public, who had barely known he existed, suddenly discovered the royal family's most human loss. His death softened the image of King George V, revealing a father's grief beneath a crown. For a monarch defined by discipline, the loss of his youngest son was a rare fracture in his unyielding composure. Prince John's short life became over time one of the most poignant chapters in the history of the Windsors. A reminder that even royalty cannot escape the quiet tragedies that touch every family. Number 5. Prince George, Duke of Kent. George, Duke of Kent, was born on December 20, 1902, handsome, intelligent, and charismatic. He was the most modern of King George V's children, and perhaps the most restless. While his father embodied Victorian duty and restraint, George belonged to a new age, one of glamour, speed, and scandal. From the start, he stood apart from his brothers. Educated at Eton and trained in the Royal Navy, he possessed a refined intellect and cosmopolitan taste. He spoke several languages, loved art and fashion, and moved easily among Europe's aristocracy. But behind his charm was a complexity that would both fascinate and trouble the royal family. Unlike his father's stoic seriousness, George's temperament leaned toward indulgence and emotion. In the 1920s and 30s, as Britain tried to recover from war and redefine itself, George became the society prince. His circle included artists, aristocrats, and actors, a world far removed from the rigid formality of Buckingham Palace. He mingled with figures like Noel Coward, Cecil Beaton, and the fashionable elite of both London and Paris. But with fame came rumor. Whispers circulated about his romantic liaisons with women and men alike, in an age when such rumors could destroy reputations and destabilize dynasties. King George V, ever the disciplinarian, was deeply uneasy about his son's reputation. Yet he also saw in him a spark of modernity that the monarchy would one day need. George was given official duties representing the crown abroad, serving as a link between the royal family and the artistic and military communities. In 1934, he married Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark, a union that combined European royal lineage with striking beauty and grace. Their marriage brought stability and produced 3 children, Prince Edward, Princess Alexandra, and Prince Michael of Kent, all of whom would later carry the family legacy into the modern age. Despite his charm and family devotion, George's life carried a darker undercurrent. During World War II, he returned to military service holding a post in the Royal Air Force. But on August 25, 1942, tragedy struck. The Duke of Kent was aboard a military flying boat, a short Sunderland, when it crashed into a hillside in Caithness, Scotland. All but one of the crew were killed. George was just 39 years old, the first member of the royal family to die on active military duty in over 450 years. The official explanation cited bad weather, but speculation lingered questions about why the Duke himself had been at the controls and what mission he was truly on. His death shrouded his life in mystery, a blend of heroism and enigma that seemed almost cinematic. For King George V, who had died 6 years earlier, the tragedy could never be known, but for the royal family it was another reminder that privilege does not protect against fate. The Duke of Kent's story was one of brilliance and restlessness, a prince who embodied the elegance and danger of a changing century, and whose early death left behind both admiration and unanswered questions. Number 4. Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester. Prince Henry, Duke of Gloucester, was born on March 31, 1900, the third son of King George V and Queen Mary, and the most dutiful of all their children. While his brothers George and Edward flirted with glamour and controversy, Henry represented the backbone of his father's values, disciplined service, and an unshakable sense of order. From an early age, Henry showed little interest in politics or pageantry. What he valued was stability. Educated at Eton and then the Royal Military College at Sandhurst, he followed the path his father had hoped all his sons would into a life of military professionalism and quiet service. Unlike his brothers, he never sought the limelight. He was a soldier first, a royal second. In 1919, Henry was commissioned as an officer in the King's Royal Rifle Corps. His years in uniform defined him. He served in Ireland during the turbulent final days of British rule, and later in Africa and the Middle East. He never commanded vast armies, but he represented the kind of steady, dependable leadership that King George V valued above all else. Though the press often called him the shy prince, Henry's loyalty to family was unwavering. During the 1930s, as his elder brother Edward VIII grew increasingly reckless and defied the constraints of royal duty, Henry remained his father's quiet reassurance. He supported both his parents through the crises of health politics and war that defined their later years. In 1935, he married Lady Alice Montague Douglas Scott, a woman of noble birth who shared his modesty and discipline. Their union was free from scandal, simple, solid, and grounded. Together they had 2 sons, Prince William of Gloucester and Prince Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the latter of whom continues to serve as a working royal to this day. Henry's role expanded dramatically in 1945 when he was appointed Governor-General of Australia, the first member of the British royal family to hold that post. The appointment symbolized a new phase in the monarchy, one where royal presence replaced imperial rule. His time in Australia, though brief, left a lasting impression. The press admired his humility, and the people saw in him not a distant aristocrat, but a man of quiet sincerity. Yet his later years were marked by tragedy. His elder son, Prince William, a daring pilot and modern adventurer, was killed in a plane crash in 1972 at just 30 years old, echoing the fate of his uncle, the Duke of Kent. By then, Henry was elderly and frail, but the loss devastated him. Prince Henry died in 1974, the last surviving child of King George V. Of all the royal siblings, he had lived the longest and perhaps the most consistent life, a man who found nobility not in power or fame, but in steadfast duty. In many ways, Henry was the quiet embodiment of his father's ideal, loyal, restrained, and anchored by service. If Edward represented rebellion and George represented modernity, Henry represented endurance, the calm center of a dynasty often torn between tradition and change. Number 3. Princess Mary, the Princess Royal Princess Mary, the only daughter of King George V and Queen Mary, was born on April 25, 1897, a child of empire who grew into the conscience of her royal family. Surrounded by brothers destined for command uniforms and crowns, Mary forged her place through service. She would become known as the working princess, steadfast, compassionate, and in many ways, the emotional backbone of the House of Windsor. From a young age, Mary reflected her parents' values, discipline, modesty, and devotion to duty, while her brothers attended naval academies and military colleges. Mary's education centered on public service and moral conduct qualities, Queen Mary believed essential for a royal woman. But unlike many princesses of her generation, Mary was not content with ceremonial roles. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 gave her purpose. Barely 17, she threw herself into wartime efforts. She established the Princess Mary's Christmas Gift Fund, which sent over 2 million parcels to soldiers at the front, each containing tobacco, chocolate, and a personal message from the king's daughter. The initiative captured the nation's heart. Soldiers carried her tins into battle as small tokens of comfort from home. And Mary became a symbol of Britain's endurance during its darkest hour. After the war, she continued her work with veterans and nurses, visiting hospitals and fundraising for the British Red Cross. While her brothers wrestled with the politics of empire, Mary's quiet constancy won her universal respect. She was, as one journalist wrote, a royal without distance. In 1922, she married Viscount Henry Lascelles, later the 6th Earl of Harewood, and moved to Harewood House in Yorkshire. Their marriage was a partnership of respect and mutual support, producing 2 sons, George and Gerald. Far from London's rigid court life, Mary found freedom in Yorkshire, where she devoted herself to local causes, especially hospitals, schools, and welfare for the poor. Yet she remained a working member of the royal family, carrying out hundreds of engagements and representing the crown across the Commonwealth. When her father died in 1936 and the monarchy plunged into crisis after Edward VIII's abdication, Princess Mary stood by her brother, now King George VI. Her calm strength helped steady the family during a time of immense public scrutiny. During World War II, she resumed her wartime role, inspecting nurses visiting bombed cities and comforting civilians. Her dedication spanned decades, continuing well into her old age. Even in the reign of her niece, Queen Elizabeth II, Princess Mary remained active, a living link between the Victorian monarchy and the modern world. She was the embodiment of continuity duty, without drama grace, without vanity. When she died in 1960, Britain mourned her not as a celebrity, but as a servant. The Princess Mary Christmas tin, once sent to soldiers in muddy trenches, became her enduring symbol, a small gift that spoke of immense compassion. Among King George V's 6 children, Princess Mary was the heart loyal to her father's values, unshaken by the turmoil that consumed her brothers, and beloved by the people she quietly served. Number 2. King George VI, Albert, Bertie, Albert, and Frederick. Arthur George, born on December 14, 1895, was never meant to be king. Known within the family as Bertie, he was the shy second son of King George V, dutiful, soft-spoken, and forever living in the shadow of his charismatic older brother, Edward the Prince of Wales. Yet destiny, as it often does in royal history, had its own plans. From childhood, Bertie's life was defined by struggle. He was painfully shy, suffered from chronic stomach ailments, and most visibly battled a severe stammer that turned every public word into an ordeal. His father, a stern disciplinarian who believed in emotional restraint above all else, saw Bertie's hesitation as weakness. It was Queen Mary who offered him patience and affection, though even she expected perfection. In a family that valued composure as the highest virtue, Bertie grew up feeling inadequate, loyal, but overlooked. Still, duty was his refuge. He joined the Royal Navy as a cadet, later serving bravely during World War I aboard the battleship Collingwood, seeing action at the Battle of Jutland in 1916. Though he never sought glory, he proved himself quietly courageous. His men respected his steadiness and humility, qualities that would define his later reign. In 1923, he married Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, a union that would transform his life and ultimately the monarchy. Elizabeth's warmth and confidence balanced Bertie's insecurity. Their partnership was built on deep affection and mutual support, producing two daughters, Princess Elizabeth, the future Queen Elizabeth II, and Princess Margaret. Their home, unlike many royal households, was known for laughter and love rather than formality. But the greatest test of Bertie's life came in 1936. When his older brother, now King Edward VIII, abdicated the throne to marry American divorcee Wallis Simpson, the monarchy faced its gravest crisis in centuries. Overnight, the reluctant prince became King George VI, taking his father's name as a symbol of continuity and duty. Terrified but resolute, he worked tirelessly to master his speech impediment with the help of therapist Lionel Logue, whose unorthodox techniques and friendship allowed the king to find his voice. His first major test came with the outbreak of World War II, when his calm radio addresses and visible solidarity with the British people made him a symbol of national endurance. He and Queen Elizabeth refused to leave London during the Blitz, visiting bombed neighborhoods and troops embodying courage under fire. By the war's end, the shy boy who once struggled to speak had become the monarch who inspired a nation. His humility, honesty, and unwavering sense of duty redefined kingship for the modern age. Yet the strain of responsibility took its toll. A lifelong smoker, George VI's health deteriorated rapidly in the post-war years. He died in 1952 at the age of 56, passing the crown to his 25-year-old daughter, Queen Elizabeth II. Among King George V's children, Bertie was the most human, the one who turned frailty into strength, silence into leadership, and fear into faith. His life was proof that greatness is not born from confidence, but from courage. Number 1. King Edward VIII, the Duke of Windsor, Edward Albert, Christian George. Andrew Patrick David, known to his family simply as David, was born on June 23, 1894. The first child of King George V and Queen Mary. From the moment of his birth, he was destined for the throne, and from the moment he could think for himself, he began to resent it. Handsome, charming, and intensely charismatic Edward was everything his father was not, and everything the modern age seemed to demand in a king. Yet beneath that brilliance was a restless spirit that would ignite the greatest scandal in the history of the British monarchy. As the Prince of Wales, Edward quickly became the darling of the 1920s. He toured the empire tirelessly, shaking hands with miners, visiting factories, and walking unguarded through crowds, a first for a royal heir. His natural warmth and informality made him wildly popular among the public. To a war-weary nation, he embodied youth, vitality, and hope. But to King George V, Edward's informality bordered on recklessness. The king once confided, "After I am dead, the boy will ruin himself in 12 months." It was a father's prophecy, and it would come true. Edward's charm concealed a deep disaffection with royal duty. He grew bored of protocol and weary of ceremony. He sought excitement and found it in women glamour and the shifting politics of a turbulent age. By the early 1930s, he had begun an affair with Wallis Simpson, an American socialite who was already married for the second time. Their relationship, which the press initially ignored, became an open secret within royal and political circles. When King George V died in January 1936, Edward ascended the throne as King Edward VIII, a modern monarch for a new era. But within months, he had plunged the crown into crisis. He made it clear that he intended to marry Wallis once her divorce was finalized. The British government, led by Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, warned that such a marriage would be unconstitutional. The Church of England would not sanction it, and the Empire would not tolerate it. Edward faced a choice: the woman he loved, or the throne he had inherited. On December 10, 1936, less than a year after becoming king, he chose love. In a broadcast that stunned the world, he declared, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king without the help and support of the woman I love." The next day, he signed the instrument of abdication. He became His Royal Highness, the Duke of Windsor, and his younger brother Bertie ascended the throne as King George VI. The two brothers, once close, were never the same again. The abdication fractured the royal family and broke their father's vision of monarchy as an unshakable institution. In exile, Edward married Wallis Simpson in France in 1937. They lived between Paris and the Riviera, surrounded by luxury but haunted by isolation. His later years were marked by controversy, whispers of Nazi sympathies during the 1930s, strained relations with his family, and growing irrelevance in the post-war world. Yet even in exile, the Duke of Windsor remained captivating, the fallen king, who had traded power for passion. When he died in 1972, his body was returned to England. He was buried at Frogmore near Windsor Castle, with Wallis later laid beside him. On his coffin lay a single card from Queen Elizabeth II, signed simply, "From Lilibet for Uncle David." Among King George V's 6 children, Edward was the rebel, the man who broke the monarchy's heart to follow his own. His abdication reshaped the royal family forever, forcing it to adapt, evolve, and endure. And though history still debates whether he was selfish or courageous, one truth remains: his choice changed the course of Britain's crown, and his shadow still lingers in every generation that followed. The story of King George V and his 6 children is a saga of duty, defiance, and destiny, a royal family caught between the grandeur of empire and the dawn of modernity. Behind the formal portraits and state ceremonies lay a dynasty marked not by perfection, but by profound humanity. A father bound by discipline, and children divided between loyalty and freedom. King George V, the monarch who guided Britain through war and uncertainty, believed that stability depended on restraint. He ruled not through charisma, but through conviction, insisting that his children uphold the dignity of the crown at all costs. Yet in demanding duty above all else, he created a generation that would both preserve and challenge his vision. His eldest son, Edward VIII, embodied the danger of desire, the prince who placed love above crown and forever altered the monarchy's path. George VI, the reluctant heir, became its redemption, the shy, stammering man who found his voice when his country needed it most. Their sister, Princess Mary, served as the heart of the family, the steady presence who turned duty into compassion. Prince Henry, the soldier and statesman, was the loyal spine of his father's ideals, while Prince George, the glamorous Duke of Kent, represented the allure and peril of modern royalty. And finally, Prince John, the lost child, revealed the vulnerability hidden behind royal walls, a reminder that even kings cannot shield their children from fate. Together, their lives tell the story of transformation. The age of empire gave way to the age of endurance. Through scandal, sacrifice, and sorrow, the monarchy evolved from the rigid grandeur of the Victorian court to the humanized institution that would survive into the 21st century. Each child of King George V, in triumph or tragedy, helped shape that evolution. By the time of his death in 1936, George V's world had already begun to vanish. The thrones of Europe had fallen, and his own family would soon bear the strain of war abdication and reinvention. Yet his legacy endured not in empire, but in example. He built a monarchy that could bend without breaking, guided by duty, even when love and rebellion tore at its seams. Today, when the British royal family stands before the world, enduring scrutiny, change, and loss, they walk a path first carved by the children of King George V. Their triumphs and their wounds continue to define what it means to be royal. Not untouchable, but enduring. For history will always remember the king who ruled an empire and the 6 children who turned his crown into a story of survival.